What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you for tuning in to the Ski System Podcast. I am your host, Abe Maynard, and today I have the pleasure of sitting down with the one and only Kyle Smaine. Kyle hails from Lake Tahoe, California, where he picked up skis at the young age of 2 and was ultimately crowned the 2015 FIS World Halfpipe Champion. He's since left competing in 2018 to pursue his passions in the backcountry, free skiing, and content creation. If you happen to enjoy this podcast and you want to see other awesome skiers in the future, please subscribe wherever you catch your podcasts and leave a comment or review. Ultimately, this podcast will only improve and get better based on the feedback that we get from you, the listener. Without further ado, from Lake Tahoe, California, Kyle Smaine. Awesome. Well, Kyle, thank you so much for joining me today. I don't know if you know this, but you are the inaugural first ever Ski System Podcast guest. How's it feel?
I didn't know that. Feels good. That's exciting.
Yeah, it's an awesome time to chat, leading up right in here to the actual ski season itself. There's so much to talk about from the off season and preparation and training and all this stuff. But before we get too into the weeds, why don't you just go ahead, for the listeners who don't know you, tell a little bit about yourself, kind of where you reside, what got you into skiing, the whole shebang.
Yeah, so Kyle Smaine, live in South Lake Tahoe, California, and that's where I grew up. Got super lucky in that sense. My parents moved here when I was 1 year old, and because my dad got a job in sales and marketing at Sierra at Tahoe.
Okay.
And yeah, started young. Kind of, I guess, career-wise, I've sort of done everything in skiing. Grew up ski racing and did a little bit of ski cross, and then did the whole slopestyle, big air, half pipe thing, and ultimately had the most contest success in half pipe.
Yeah.
Going on to like win a world championships in 2015 over in Austria, and did a couple of X Games, made finals. And then 2018 won the final Olympic qualifier at the Grand Prix in Mammoth.
Wow.
And was the first alternate for that Olympic team in 2018.
What made you want to not do that anymore? With so much success, like why leave the contest scene when seemingly everything is on that fire trajectory for you?
I would say I mean, I know the main reason for me was just like I sort of ran out of love for it. Like I think I still love competing and all that, but like the level that half pipe skiing is at now, and where it was getting to when I was still doing it, is like the tricks that the reason that like you get into it is because that feeling of like progression where you learn you're like, oh man, I think I could do this trick, and you learn the new trick and you're stoked. And like that feeds you, and you're like skiing with your buddies, and like you all have that, and you keep progressing. It got to the point where for me, the tricks that I needed to do to be competitive, I didn't care about learning. So it was
Totally
like
fair.
Yeah, it's just like all these, you have like this trick list of like, okay, well, this could fit into my run here, and like this would be really good for me to have, and like just the stuff that I needed to, if I wanted to be like, I was tired of being a consistent like 5th through 10th kind of guy, and the stuff that you needed to do to be a consistent podium threat was just like, it wasn't stuff that I personally had an interest in learning. So it kind of like, it sucked all the fun out of it for me.
It's for people that haven't, seen this run or understand Kyle's career, maybe where he was competing, like 2015 FIS World Champion for free skiing, bottom air, left side cork 9, right? And
I think so, yeah.
At this point, is that even a contest trick that is in it? Like, is that even something someone's going to do? Like, the progressions seem almost so geometric since then. Like, it looks like more of a math problem being solved than a stylistic creation.
It's always been a mix of both, right? Like you're always artistically trying to like figure out how you can make something unique and add your own style to it, and like how you can make it sort of fit into your run, where someone who's just like super into skiing, because the judges, right, they're like lifelong skiers, they're super into skiing.
Yep.
And so it's something that's like inspiring. They're like, whoa, that was just so cool. So there are tricks, like someone like Noah Bowman, or back in the day, Josh Christensen, when he still used to ski pipe. And it's like these, Noah's still doing tricks that are a switch 540 essentially, but the weird off axis rotation that he's doing and the style that he's adding to it, like it still has a place in his run and it makes sense. But yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's almost like there's not enough space in the half pipe because the technical abilities of everybody that's at that top level, they're to be a podium threat. Like the guys that are getting first and second at all these events are doing 5 or 6 doubles in a 5 or 6 hit half pipe run. And so you're just like, yeah,
That's
you don't
insane.
have room for like 3 style tricks because you're going to do like back-to-back switch doubles. And so you like, that's just like what has to take priority.
I think it's so interesting that a sport that is birthed out of pretty much like creation and rebellion. I mean, you think back to like the first ditch built half pipes showing up on Mount Hood. You got guys that are like the Canadian Air Force throwing Screaming Siemens on their first hit. And it's a complete jump from racing, from downhill, from everything that skiing really knew, to then end up in a place where it's so calculated to a degree. Like you said, it's solving how many of these can I fit into the run versus how much of my style can I express through the half pipe. Did you feel like when you left the competition scene, like being a top 10 pipe competitor and went more towards like backcountry free skiing, what did that transition feel like initially for you?
I think it wasn't weird for me. It was a huge relief, but like I had sort of been setting myself up for it for a long time. And I have to give huge credit to a lot of people over the years. Like a lot of my sponsors weren't necessarily there for the contest. Like that was still like what I wanted to do. Even, the team manager at the time at Fisher, he wasn't like telling me to quit, but he would kind of heckle me about like, why are you still skiing half pipe? And that was for, 4 years before I quit. So, like those guys were still at Fisher. They were inviting me to like the big mountain photo shoots for the year and like team stuff and going over to Austria to like work on product and that sort of thing. So like the value that I was creating for brands wasn't really in half pipe for most of the time that I was skiing half pipe. But like for me personally, I just like, I still had things that I wanted to accomplish and like a level that I felt like I could get to. And I kind of got there. And then I sort of lost the love for it like 2 years before I quit probably, but there was just still like the kind of that nagging of like, there's something I haven't done yet. And I think a lot of athletes have that. And I think it's why a lot of athletes ride the train too long and have a hard time leaving, because they're like, you're always like, you're that goal oriented person. You're always like looking forward. You're like, oh, well, I still like want to accomplish this. I want to accomplish that. And eventually it's just like, you lose some of the elements that like gave you that positivity and that momentum and that stuff. And you're just like kind of beating your head against the wall, trying to like get somewhere where you should have maybe taken another route earlier on.
Did you feel any pressures on yourself to like make the Olympics happen? Did you feel like you were letting that go too soon, so to speak, with hanging up your skis with the competition realm? Like,
yes, I would say yes. Like I probably 2017, I was in a super low, like mentally, it was that same thing, right? Like I was burnt out. The stuff that I needed to do to be competitive were like tricks that I wasn't interested in. But at that point, you're like, 2018 was the Olympic year. You're like, okay, well, I have 18 months, like I've already dedicated 25 years of my life to this. Like I can hold on to this for 18 months. And it's like, if I make the Olympics, great. And if not, and so that point, I was having a really hard time and I blew my knee in January of that year. And honestly, like
18.
even 17.
Gotcha.
And I blew my knee, like wasn't in a crash. It was landing a new trick, like landed this new trick kind of first try. did it the second time, stomped it, but like on the landing, tore my ACL and my meniscus in my left knee. And even early on, like it wasn't devastating to me. Even like in the first week, I was like, honestly, this is almost better, because it's like, no matter what, I have to come back from this healthy. Like I want to be able to ski and walk when I'm 40. So it's like, I have to put in the time, I have to put in the work on this. And then at that point, when you're thinking of like, okay, well, if in 2 years, like what are the things I could accomplish outside of pipe skiing if I was putting my energy there? And it's just a ton of unknowns, right? Like it's like that opportunity cost. But once I had blown my knee, then it was a no-brainer. I was like, oh, well, I'm out for the season. I'm not going to be healthy till October. And at that point, it's 2 months. Like you're not missing any opportunities in 2 months that are going to be better than having a shot at the Olympics.
Totally. What was that experience of injury like for you? I mean, it's almost cliche to be an athlete and to suffer some sort of like season compromising injury. Right? I mean, everyone has their story of going through it, but I don't think that does justice to the fact that each of us handle these things differently. And then the outcome of how we handle it, our mental state, our well-being, how we think of or are excited about our sport, that is a very individual process. So when you did your knees, like what was your initial kind of understanding of what was going on as it really set in that this injury is like serious and things are going to have to be done? What was that mental experience for you?
I think luckily early on is right. I already knew I was in such a unhealthy mental space, and so it wasn't some devastation on that. Like I knew it's part of the sport. Everybody's done it. At that time, there wasn't a single person on the US team for racing, maybe for almost any sport, that hadn't had a blown knee. Right. It's just so common in our sport. It's a roller coaster, it's like, I think early on, you're so incapable that you have tons of these little landmarks along the way. So early on, it's easy to like progress and to like hit all these landmarks and have this positive reinforcement. And then it's kind of the midpoint that just sucks. You're 3-4 months in, and you're walking again and you're in the gym. But I would say one of my weaknesses that I think is like kind of always held me back on things that I could have accomplished is probably like discipline.
Interesting.
I'm really easily sucked into the things that I enjoy doing, and I like obsessively get into the things that I enjoy doing, but I'm not that good at saying no to things to do what I know is better for me. So like the gym, for instance, it's like when you spend the whole summer, like I love summers here in Tahoe, there's like wakeboarding, water skiing, mountain biking, all that stuff. And it's every day, all summer long, knowing that I need to like not do the things that bring me joy and go to the gym instead was hard.
I feel like this is it's a common thing in winter sports because the culture is so like asymmetrical to your typical like gym goer. Think about football, right? Every person that you can think of in your head and that played football in high school, you can just envision them also training in the off season to get big and strong and bulldoze people.
Totally.
There's some sort of historical conflict there, I think, with like winter athletes and the fact that this is a really crucial part. And like you said, everyone knows everyone who has a blown. It's like talk to a skier and ask the skier, hey, do you know anyone who's blown their knee? The chances that person says yes, for multiple occasions is so high. Yeah. And I think part of it is because the training aspect, one, isn't really delivered in a quality way to athletes at a young age, because you're usually dealing with, and I mean, no harm in this, but you're dealing with essentially almost volunteer level coaches who really don't have an understanding of strength and conditioning by any means, instructing younger athletes and providing to the best of their ability some sort of training program, but not really the structure that these athletes require. And so you grow up with a kind of like, I don't really need, like, I'm water ramping in the off season. I got tramp training in the off season. I'm wakeboarding in the off season. Conceptually, it almost feels like, why would I need to do anything else other than this?
Yeah.
But yet we all sit here and we are able to reflect on people that we know who've had like season ending or life changing trajectory injuries that maybe they wouldn't have been prevented 100%, but the risk that they happened could have been significantly decreased with quality structure.
Yeah.
When that happened, like when you were going through your rehab for your knees, were you going through like a full like physical therapy rehabilitation type
Yeah,
procedure for
so
that?
I had like a pretty fortunate situation. Obviously, being in Lake Tahoe, we have awesome orthopedic surgeons and good physical therapy that deal with this stuff, because it's like that's what happens here is like
Skiing.
everything's orthopedic. It's like
Yeah.
skiing and biking and just like people hurting themselves.
I know.
I got super lucky. I started working a year before I got hurt. I started working with Nick Ward, and he works for Altus, and he's trained a bunch of like Olympic level bobsledders and soccer players and rugby players, and they're kind of like, now Altus is headquartered in Arizona, and like their main, I would say, specialty is track and field athletes and a lot of sprinters. But I had started working with him before, so at that point it was just like transitioning to having some physical therapists that were on board and really good on that sense, and then trying to blend this modern look of strength training with the limitations that I had because of the injury. So I got pretty lucky in that sense that I kind of like already had a pretty good structure set up.
And if I understand, like now training is like a pretty central part of your life, right? I know that you have a really good coach up there in Lake Tahoe, and you're pretty much training for the majority of the off season. And oddly enough, when you're not competing, right? So was there something along the way where there was like a pivotal experience where you kind of felt the value of it, or you're like, oh, despite not absolutely loving this, I'm going to really carve out time for this. I'm going to make this part of my like weekly kind of day-to-day experience as an athlete.
Yeah. So like you said, how it's not introduced well when you're young. I was fortunate in the sense that because I was ski racing, like strength training is a lot more a part of the culture in ski racing. And so, like I was doing dry land training on that in the gym since I was probably 13.
Yeah.
And like you said, my coach at the time, looking back now, he was like 19-year-old that grew up in Tahoe ski racing. Like he doesn't have some sort of formal training background, but I think being accustomed to that, it was always part of my fall routines. I would say sometime when I was competing, I would try to be in there like end of July, start of August to be ready for the season. And then when I pushed away from competing, it was a little bit more of like, still shooting for like August, maybe if I'm procrastinating, like September, to really put in some structure and make sure I'm in there a few days a week and building up the strength and stability outside of just like the fun sports.
Right.
So I've had that for a long time. I was doing that on my own pretty religiously, even back when I was, 17, getting ready for junior worlds and stuff like that. So it's been a part of it for a long time. I would say the biggest difference, the biggest transition for me is like getting over this stigma of hating the gym and realizing that like I still, just like you feel good after a mountain bike ride, like I still like that feeling after going to the gym. And maybe it's not as exhilarating, but seeing the value in training year round and like actually still going to the gym in the winter, because it was always, train August through Thanksgiving, and then like try to get as much strength in as you can, and then it's ski season, just ski, and then deal with it again in September. And now, like trying to be in the gym pretty regularly in the winter, and then even throughout the summer, just so you don't have to make up all these deficits all the time. Like you stay at a way higher, level year round.
I think like to everything that you're saying, it's like this ever ready preparedness. Like if you called me tomorrow and said, "Hey, I'm doing this sick trail. Is your bike good to go?" I want to be able to say, "Yeah, where do you want me?" Or if you say, "I think I'm going to skin this crazy loop. Like, are you doing anything Saturday?" I want to say, "No, I'm not doing anything Saturday. Let's do it."
Yeah.
And you don't have to love strength training to understand that strength training, finding whatever your consistency is, even if it's, 2 days a week, it's keeping your body in this constant state to be ready to go do those things that you like to do whenever the hell you want to do them. And
Yeah.
that includes wakeboarding, wake surfing, running, hiking, biking. If you live in the mountains, you live in the mountains because you like to be in the mountains. And everything that the mountains present us with from an activity standpoint are made better and more enjoyable if your body's in a good position to do it. If your
Yeah.
knees are all jacked up and you're unstable and you have bad hip mechanics, you're going to tweak yourself hiking and it's going to be a huge bummer. So
Yeah.
finding those ways, it's almost like gamifying the gym. Like, okay, I like the feeling when I'm done and I like to be able to ride my bike. Then this is a necessary evil to make those other two things work well. It's kind
Yeah.
of like the circle there. Where are you training out of in Lake Tahoe?
So right now I'm training. I work with this group. They're called PT Revolution. They were physical therapists that were at Barton Health, the hospital here. And Altus did a contract with Barton to like build out this whole performance training and everything. But when COVID hit, like the indoor training abilities, especially being healthcare, like they're just so limited on what you're allowed to do and how many people you can have inside. And all these physical therapists were the ones that really kind of bought into that program and were taking on this like cohesive approach of training, but also assessing like your mobility limitations and like small injuries or like chronic stuff that you've had along the way, so that you can really like maximize that training opportunity. And they were on board with that stuff, and they all got laid off during COVID, and so they started their own program. So it's called PT Revolution, and it's a small gym, but it's like it's got everything that I need, and it's really good people in there. And there are a lot of the people that made the difference when I was coming back from my knee, and they've been super supportive ever since. So
That's such an important part, is the like the trust in the community aspect when you're dealing with this stuff, like whether it's injury prevention, injury risk reduction, or coming back from an injury, just like trusting the people that you're working with, that they know what they're doing. And even as a coach myself, I entrust my training to other people. It's nice to not think about it. You could probably put together a really functional, complex program, map it out for a couple of weeks, and you'd be totally fine. But the difference between having someone else there, other eyes on you, other people that you can talk to about whatever you're dealing with, be that mental or physical, it's so awesome. And it's a blessing when you find a really cool place like that. So one more time, just for if anyone's listening from Lake Tahoe, it's
PT Revolution.
PT Revolution. Awesome.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I wish we had growing up in Steamboat was we had the Winter Sports Club, and then we had our like training facility within that. But I do wish that there was like a more focused kind of athletes that are looking to get a little bit more out of their training, because it's tough when you're a younger kid. It's big groups, right? The after school programs and skiing programs. So you have mixed levels of interest. You have someone who's trying to become a FIS World Champion next to someone who's like, well, my parents told me I had to play soccer or I got to ski, and I decided to ski. So it would have been nice to have a facility like that or something to go into, but it is what it is. When you get on snow, how does your training change? Like, how do you maintain the work that you've been doing in the off season and carry that into, even if you're not competing? Let's say you're doing a bunch of backcountry work or content creation, stuff like that. How do you bring this into your season and manage that balance there?
Yeah. You just, like, for me, it's just been shifting the program. So, you spend so much more of your time in the off season, like building that strength and stability, and then getting closer to the season, adding in like some dynamic stuff. And then, once you start skiing, the the dynamic elements are in your sport, right? Like you're hiking up, you're skiing down, you're jumping off stuff. Like you don't need that. So for me, it's kind of like mostly it's like the core strength stuff, so that I can try to maintain that strength and power and ability to absorb, and then trying to maintain mobility. So it's like easier days that are way more mobility based. You know, it's not about heavy load, that stuff to mix in as like recovery elements for all the skiing that I'm doing, and then trying to add those core things. And I know for me personally, the things that I'm always thinking of keeping in my program is like skiing and biking are both super quad dominant, and it's all the front part of your body. So for me, it's always like everything posterior chain, and I've injured my back a bunch of times, like hitting jumps too much. And like, that's the stuff that you never work out doing sports, except for the only thing I can think of is like hard slalom water skiing, like when you're really pulling hard.
You're like gunning across the lake.
Yeah. But aside from that, it's like you never have anything that's sport based that's going to replace deadlifts or cleans or anything like that. That's like really requires like a lot of full body stability, but it's like training those like hamstring, glutes, back, that whole posterior chain. And so for me, those are like the core things where I'm trying to go in there, do that, maybe not as heavy, not like blowing myself up like I would in the off season, but something to like try to help maintain so that doesn't go away.
I'm like shouting your name from the rooftops right now. I mean, everything, like, it's so funny. I just got off a call with Isabel Hansen because we're transitioning her program into her season. And like, I wish I could just record what you just said, because if I play it right next to exactly what we were just talking about, it's to a T. It's you take the bulk of that off season where you're really trying to add as much strength to your body when the risk is the lowest. You're not competing, you're not skiing. Even if you got hurt, you have time to get better to come back in. And then transitioning it to dynamics, like, can you take the strength that you built in the off season and apply it in an environment that's going to be similar to the sport? Can you change direction? Can you slow down? Can you speed up? Can you do all these things that when you're scaling some gnarly chute in the backcountry and you got to do really quick, explosive powered movements and hop turns and stuff like that, you're not wishing that you had done the training. But it is so important to do some type of maintenance through the season. And it's exactly what you said: lower impact, lower volume, a lot of core strength, because you're bringing the strength that you've built in the off season to where you're at. And now you don't want to get weaker and you don't want to get hurt. So if you can find that minimal frequency where it really allows you to keep what you've been doing there, and then have the confidence to push yourself when you're in the elements without being worried that something is going to happen. Like, I mean, it's so cool to hear you say that, especially because this isn't your profession, you know, but to be the fact that you've absorbed that information and you can apply it, it's a testament to the people that you've worked with along the way and the coaches that you've been exposed to, because they've obviously connected a lot of these dots. Like, I wish that there was a way to get in the head of every single skier in the world and just motivate them a little bit to like do some minimal training throughout the year.
Totally.
Because it's hard to
get
that
message. It makes such a big difference. And I think a lot of it, I think people aren't that good. Humans in general aren't that good at like objectively knowing where they're at. Like, you think you feel good, and then but if you were to do like a mobility test on like your shoulders, like you're shitty, but you're like, oh, I've been climbing 7 days a week, like I've been going running. It's like such a classic mountain thing of like, oh yeah, well, I'm climbing all the time, I'm running, I'm like doing all these things, and then but like functionally moving, if you wanted to go, like one of my buddies, like I don't think I've ever beaten him up a skin track ever, and he's started training with us this year now, and he like couldn't even do a proper kettlebell swing. He like didn't really have the hip hinging mobility, and he's like unbelievable. Used to do freeride world tour events on a snowboard, and it's like unbelievable on the skin track. But it's just one of like, that's a classic mountain scenario where it's like they're fueling their body on those activities, but you're lacking the mobility, you're lacking like these other elements to like build a whole package. And so you are you're good at certain things, but you're a shell of what you could be if you rounded it out.
That is such a crucial aspect of this conversation, is that it is not to say that people can't be good at things without proficiency and mobility. And your friend's a great example. Dude crushes you on the skin track. Functional training approach, like what we're really talking about is, what are you missing out on from a lack of performance? Like if you take someone who can run a mile in 7 minutes, but they have horrible hip mobility, horrible ankle mobility, and they have poor mechanics and overhead positions, and you took that same person and just improved those baseline metrics. So you got them to proficient hip mobility, proficient overhead mobility, and then sent them out to do the same exact thing. They are going to perform better, period, just
Totally.
from a mechanic standpoint. And what they're really saving themselves from, which they have no way of knowing this, is future injury. Like your buddy may do this. He may crush you up the skin track 100 times, but on the 120th time, a little issue that could have been resolved years ago all of a sudden presents itself in a really gnarly way. And for skiers, especially people out in challenging elements, you don't want to be out in the backcountry and have some shit injury happen that you could have prevented. You don't want to deal with that, straight up. Like poor hip mechanics lead to some knee issue while you're skinning up some crazy thing that you've been preparing for, and now you're 6 hours away from anyone. Hard pass. But assessing those mechanics on a baseline, free environment where there's no external factors, and just assessing where someone's at and then improving those. Again, I wish that everyone had little, headphones in right now listening to that, because it's so true.
Yeah.
I guess this is an interesting segue, but with all this efforts on training and a focus in the off season, your volume of biking, passion for road biking, mountain biking, everything, you had a pretty wild experience this summer.
Yeah, I had a few. I mean, it feels so minor to start it with this, because in the scheme of everything else that happened this summer, but it was like back in June, I crashed water skiing and sprained both my ankles.
Wow.
And
like limited, like you actually went diagnosed and they're like, yeah, dude, these are toast, stay off them, or you just knew?
Yeah, I mean, it was hard to walk.
Yeah.
One was a lot worse than the other. So did that. I was able to, like, if I taped my ankles pretty significantly, I could still bike. So it was like fine. I just couldn't go water skiing. And then July 7th, I was on my road bike on my lunch break from work. I was going to help a buddy launch his boat, and I got hit by a car.
Jeez.
So a car came across from the center. Yeah, so it was like traffic was backed up in town. So 2 lanes of traffic going this way, the same direction I was going. And a car came across through a gap in the traffic because everyone was fully stopped. So it wasn't a noticeable gap for me. I had just come through a green light. The next stoplight was green as well. And I was being super cautious because I was scared someone was going to turn right without looking to take back roads.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm looking ahead, and a van, like I couldn't see him, he couldn't see me, popped out right in front of me, and I smashed right into his front end, got ejected over the hood, luckily, and tuck and rolled in the parking lot. And somehow, I mean, I got so lucky. I like clean tuck and roll, barely scuffed my helmet, and I just ended up with a sprained wrist and road rash.
Jeez.
But that took me out. I was like sprained wrist, couldn't, like, stops you from doing a lot of things. I couldn't bike took me like 4.5 weeks to get on a road bike, 6 weeks to get on a mountain bike.
What's going through your head through those 6 weeks? Like you're fresh off 2 sprained ankles, water skiing. You just got teed up by a car.
I mean, it sucked, but it's just like, I was thankful that it wasn't worse.
The irony.
And I just changed the priorities, right? I was like going to the gym and doing what I could. It was like I couldn't lift heavy loads with my left arm. So trying to see, like, how can I still add real load with only one arm.
I mean, you're hitting peak in gym creativity here.
Yeah. And then I just shifted, it was like when I had free time, I just prioritized going on the boat and wake surfing, because it was the only It was the only activity to like get a release that I could really do without hurting my wrist.
Right.
So that's just what I did. But then we had all the fires, like Dixie Fire, up to the north of us, and then eventually the Caldor Fire, and I got evacuated from my house for 2 weeks for the Caldor Fire. And like when we got evacuated, I still wasn't biking at that point. It was like halfway through evacuation, I started mountain biking again. Came back from being evacuated for 2 weeks, was home for 1 week, and then now, like a week and a half ago now, I just like had I mean, ultimately it was an accident, but like a miscalculation. I hit a tree on my mountain bike going about 25 miles an hour. And I just spent a week in the trauma hospital in Reno, 3 days in the ICU. And I had a chest tube into my lung or my chest cavity for 5.5 days. Jesus.
What a summer, man.
Yeah, it's been exhausting.
In a 2-month period, right? You sprain both your ankles, you get hit by a car, your whole backyard lights on fire, you're evacuated. And then when that settles down, you hit a tree going 25 miles an hour and spend the better part of a week in the ICU.
Yes.
Talk to me about that part, being in the ICU.
Oh, I mean, it was, I guess once I was there, it was kind of a relief. It was probably 36, 48 hours where it was scary. So like the injuries I sustained from hitting the tree is like, I broke my ribs. I broke my fibula, the smaller bone in your lower leg, but I also ruptured my spleen. And so that was one of the main concerns. I had a grade 4 laceration. He pretty much told me I splattered my spleen. And so, I wasn't able to eat for a day and a half because at any moment, if that started bleeding too much, they would have to put me in emergency surgery and pull it out. Luckily, I still have it and it's okay. And then I had a small puncture in my lungs that air was leaking out in. And on the second day, like I didn't have the first day, but the second day from the trauma of the impact with the tree, my chest cavity started filling with blood and fluid. And so they had to put the chest tube in on my second day in the ICU.
To drain it.
And ultimately, like when they first put it in and put it on suction, they pulled out half a liter of blood right away. And then over the next 5 days that I had it, I drained another like 1,200, 1,300 liters or milliliters. Sorry. So like, a liter and a quarter.
Jeez.
Yeah.
How much can you lose?
I don't know.
I'm hearing it just sounds like you lost a lot of, like you lost enough blood to be watching it be lost and be concerned about the fact that it's not in your body anymore.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately I basically like lost, it wasn't all blood, after a couple of days, it transitions to like a mix of blood and kind of pus or whatever sort of fluid is filling up in there. But ultimately it was like almost like a 2-liter soda bottle worth of shit that came out of my chest cavity that was threatening to like collapse my lung.
Are you sitting in there having like an existential breakdown, like honestly wondering what's going to happen? Like, are you concerned that maybe you're not okay? How did your family feel like? Or were you just there and kind of going through the motions knowing like, this will pass kind of thing?
I didn't feel like I was having an existential crisis. I mean, the scary part was during the injury, and it's like getting to the hospital. And then it like, once you're to care, for me, there's nothing I can do, right? Like everything, I have no control of it. Like my body's going to respond to the trauma, how my body's going to respond to the trauma. And at least now I'm in the care of people that should be super proficient at what they do. And they're going to do everything they can to help me. But like, I can't, nothing I'm going to do sitting in that bed is going to make a difference of like whether or not my spleen gets to stay in or not, or how quickly I'm creating fluid into my lungs.
If you could just shut that down real quick. Damn.
Yeah, I wish I could have. I would have loved to be out of the hospital a few days earlier.
I'd spent 3 days in a hospital. I had it was an elective surgery. It wasn't hitting a tree, but I had like a big chest surgery when I was 16. I remember spending like 3 days in the hospital. I had a bladder catheter. I had a chest tube like you had. It just felt so alien. Like I felt like such a project just sitting there, and I got tubes coming out of me that are collecting fluid. I had no control over, my body or anything. And it was just such a strange experience. It felt very out of control.
Yeah. I mean, it is. I never knew. There's so many people that hate the hospital and hate doctors, and I kind of never understood that. And now I do, because after spending 7 days in the hospital, I mean, it's like all those people are so busy and they have so many things to do. And like, unless you're really severely ill, like once I had my chest tube in and I was out of the ICU, I was pretty independent, like I could go for a walk with the walker and I could get up and go to the bathroom. And so it was like, it's just so isolating. Like there's nothing you can really do. And the only thing keeping me there was that I still had this chest tube in, and every day there's a threshold, right? Like if I drained less than 150 milliliters in 24 hours, then they can pull it out, and then they have to keep me for a waiting period to make sure that it doesn't fill up too much with blood in that once they have it out, and then they can release me. So it's every day just this battle was the hardest part. Is like, I know what it drained during the day because I can watch it.
Yeah.
But then you go to sleep at night and they check it in the morning. So, be like, oh, I only drained 55 milliliters from 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. Like, that's pretty good. I might be able to get out tomorrow. And then like you wake up and I drained 160 overnight. And like, anytime they don't pull it out, the protocol is they're supposed to hold you for 24 hours after they pull the chest tube out. So it's just like every morning you wake up and it's either like, the short end was like, if they pull it, they might only keep me for 8 or 12 hours and then do another x-ray and check, or it'll be a day. But you find out in the morning, it's either like you drain too much and now you have 2 more days,
Right. It's
or
always an additional 24 no matter what when you find out that you're in the delay.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And so when were you cleared? You were cleared from the hospital how long ago?
Last Friday, a week ago now. It's
So I
Thursday
mean,
today.
this is extremely fresh. I mean, we're talking to like Kyle 1 week out.
Yes, this is Kyle 1 week out of the hospital.
How do you feel now, having been cleared? The chest tube is out. This accident, seemingly is behind you. The season's around the corner. Where's your head at as far as these next like couple months, or any kind of insights that you got while you were in there? Like, I mean, that's insane, man. That is an insane summer. Seriously.
Yeah. I mean, where I'm at now, it's I'm feeling very fortunate, because it was like, that could have been way worse. It's like no head injury, no neck injury, no concussion. I'm not paralyzed. I didn't have any surgeries. I didn't do something like smash my shoulder where I'm going to need rotator cuff, some sort of, no joints were hurt. So there's no risk of like future arthritis. Like, really right now I'm sitting here, and the timeline for my spleen, like I can't do anything that can risk taking a chest impact. But the timeline for my spleen, they told me 3 weeks. I've kind of like been doing some more research. I think really it's more like 4 to 8 weeks. But that timeline, I'm sitting here with broken ribs and a fractured leg, but I'm allowed to walk on the leg because your other bone, your tibia, takes 85% of the load. And I'm like, wow, I mean, by 6 weeks will be the end of October, and I might be totally fine at end of October. And if not, by mid-November, I should be like pretty much cleared. And I'll certainly be behind on where I want to be fitness wise for this winter, but like something like that it shouldn't really disrupt my winter at all, as far as being able to ski and do the things that I was hoping to do this winter. So just lucky, because anything could have, a lot of things went right to not make it worse than it was.
Well, and I mean, this is selfish comment on training, but like your training is definitely a testament to your recovery too. I mean, there's plenty of research out there that shows that people that are consistently training, and that doesn't mean squatting, like, but some sort of training program or keeping themselves healthy, fit, cardiovascularly, muscularly, your body's ability to recover from trauma is much greater. And so do you feel like you will have a quicker return to training because you were in the past? Do you feel like your training that led up to these events helped you withstand the impact itself and recover from it? Like when you think about training and these events that happen, how do they connect?
Yeah, I think it really lines up with, you know, what you're trying to kind of break through on people, is that that base level of fitness makes a huge difference in injury avoidance and resistance. You know, like I've had a lot of practice falling over the years, right? And so that's, but if I wasn't moving well, like the likelihood that when I got hit by a car, I somehow managed to like clean tuck and roll after getting ejected 20 feet into a parking lot and end up with a sprained wrist, like probably wouldn't have happened to most people. Most people probably would have face planted and been really hurt. You know, hitting this tree, yeah, absolutely. I don't know how I'm not more hurt. Like even my leg, like it's so rare to break a fibula without breaking the tibia because of how much more dominant that bone is. And so
Yeah.
the fact that it was just like only just straight blunt force impact to my lower leg and it like fractured that, but everything else is okay. And even my ribs, just two broken ribs, because that was the first thing that was just like a straight T-bone impact straight on my torso to a tree at 25 miles an hour. So I think it does, like all of that kind of just well-rounded fitness and mobility undoubtedly saved me from a lot worse of an outcome. And generally being fit makes a huge difference on the recovery side of things.
I think it's worth noting that like this is not reserved for athletes. Like you're unfortunately you had multiple slams right back to back. Like you're the only skier to throw a switch 9 off a bike over a truck and land in a parking lot and walk away. But like your ability to have these things happen, not get completely laid up, recover them from them quickly, have proprioception within a traumatic event, which in and of itself is kind of a wild thing to even think about. The fact that like if you took 10 people and had them collide with a truck and each person was going to eject over it, not all 10 people are landing the way you did. Not all 10 people are getting out of it the way you did. The fact that your body will, you know, neurologically kick into this air awareness the second that you're off the ground. I mean, it's not crazy to think that that lent itself to you walking away from that event. Totally. And it's 100%. Not crazy to think that the muscle that you've built in your body, and that doesn't mean muscle that makes you big necklace ogre bodybuilder guy. We're talking just like muscle that your body needs muscle to function. That's how joints act. They flex and extend because muscles are the levers that do that. The muscle that you've placed around your body and your bones throughout the years has given cushion for impact. When you hit a tree going 25 miles an hour, anyone can actually think about what that would be like. That would be running 3 times faster than anyone's capable of running and doing it straight into a tree. Your muscle around the bone is the cushion between you, your organs, your vital organs, and then that object. And so it's physics. Like if you take something and apply force into it, it's going to redistribute the force. If you have more muscle surrounding your bones, there's going to be less trauma. And that's true for anyone that steps into skis this year. Like if you're a recreational dude and you go out and you only ski 1 week a year and you think that 1 week that you ski, everything's just going to fire on all cylinders. And when some idiot who's not paying attention to you cuts you off and you hit the ground, you know, not many people are practicing falling Monday through Friday. And when you fall in your ski season, you want cushion. You want to be able to bounce up and go, whoa, and shake it off and watch the video on your buddy's camera and laugh. You don't want to ride down on a stretcher and go through that experience. I'm
totally.
so glad that you were able to get through those things. I mean, I'm still kind of like, I had the opportunity, one, to read this like the day before, think about it, then hear you say it here. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around the fact that that actually happened to you and that you were only released from the hospital 5 days ago.
Yeah.
Like, blessings on blessings on blessings. The fact that you're just here, like, yeah, I don't know, I'm like getting ready for the ski season. I mean, it's really good to see, and I'm glad that you were able to step out of that. How are you gonna, like, what's your timeline from a doctor perspective between where you're at right now and, like, I guess kind of putting all your efforts forward in skiing, backcountry, stuff like that? Will they be limiting your exposure to certain features? Do they not want you jumping? Like, what's their protocol for that?
I haven't heard any restrictions. I would say historically, doctors, doctors are funny in that, like, sometimes they tell you no, you can't do some things, and sometimes they tell you yes, you can do some things, but it's so arbitrary because it's like so much more dependent on how you've been healing and like what active steps that you've been taking to like build yourself back up and recover. I think the it should be fine. My spleen, based on what I've seen so far, my spleen should be fine. That's like the scariest thing, is like taking another impact to that too soon, because it was already damaged, could just cause those scabs to break and it could just start bleeding and I would just need emergency surgery. But the timeline on that is kind of the same as what my broken bones are. So
Yeah.
really, I think like November I'll be cleared to ski. And I guess my plan is to, I'll be getting on snow, but really spending November and December to try and prioritize time in the gym and kind of catching back up to where I was, and certainly going skiing and skiing kind of mellower, but like trying to get myself back to a place where I feel like my body has the strength where I'm protected against those injuries. Because last thing I want to do is just like get fired up to go skiing again because I've been hurt and then like stack another injury on top, because
Totally.
it's kind of always how it rolls.
That's, I mean, the crux of an athlete, right? It's like you always have that mindset that's accomplishment based, goal setting based. So you're immediately mapping everything out, and we all want to return to our old self as quick as possible. But you hit on an extremely valuable point, which is that you gotta, like, you have to respect the recovery process. It
Totally.
is in your future best interest to take the time, get things done right, even if it means, pushing things back an extra week or two. You will thank yourself 100 times over than going too soon, getting stoked, and then making like a bad decision.
Yeah, and then splatting again. And I think luckily I got
it's like the worst word.
Luckily I got to see so many people. I mean, through skiing, right, over the years, I can't even count how many. There's so, because we're all young athletes, right? You're like skiing half pipe, slope style, whatever. It's all the same kind of crowd, and the number of athletes that blow a knee and then come back, and it's like you do it when you're coming back. If you've been training well, it's 6 months, you feel good. You feel pretty normal, especially if you're someone that hasn't been historically like training a lot in the past. You're kind of like, whoa, I feel like at least as good as I ever have, but you're still not all the way healed. When I came back from my knee, I didn't get on snow till 9 or 10 months out,
Yeah.
which, I had tons of friends that would do it in like 6. And I would say even like that Mammoth Grand Prix was 1 year, and I was still having a lot of tendonitis in my knee, but I would say it was really like that point, a year out from the injury, was when I would say I was, aside from like the tendonitis on my patellar tendon where they took the graft from, that's really what it took. I think it took a full 12 months to like feel pretty confident about where I was at.
And what's 12 months in the rest of your life skiing? It's to do that the right way. It's nothing. To do that too early, it's potentially, I mean, everyone knows someone who's like still nursing an injury from 15 years ago. That's not how it should be. It should be a lot of time for recovery, be pragmatic about it, return to sport, and don't think about it. But this is a kind of a sidebar, but your comment about doctors and just being I don't know how to put it gingerly, but you know what I'm saying. I went in for my knee appointment. This is like to a T what you're talking about. I go in for my appointment to get my knee checked out from, if you haven't seen the video, I tweaked it really bad in a jiu-jitsu tournament and it's nasty. I mean, the angle of my knee popping was disgusting. I like can barely watch the video now. So I go in there, doctor does all these stress tests and everything. And then at the end of it, he gives me, you won't be able to see it on audio, but he gives me this, which is like, this is like a geriatric PDF handout from high school, like phys ed class, without asking me what I'm doing, without asking me about my training, without asking me what I was doing leading up to it, which if he had asked, I've done every single one of these exercises with 5 times the loading that's prescribed in this for sure.
Yeah.
There's just not, like, unfortunately, you do have to take, like you said, they said this, I did some more research and I found out that it was actually 4 to 8 weeks, right? They're kind of ushering you in and out. And the prescription in a lot of instances, especially if you're in a city that doesn't deal with ski related injuries, like Tahoe's probably some of the best that you're going to get, right? Like a Tahoe somewhere in Colorado, Vail, you're going to see a doctor who probably skis knee injuries 24/7 all year long, is pretty well versed in them. But for a lot of people that are living in cities and going skiing on the weekends, or you're traveling for skiing, the doctor's lack of exposure to types of sport related injuries really don't set you up well for the right recovery options. And I think because of that reason, it's another driving factor behind why you should want to prepare your body so that you're minimizing all the opportunities that you might be in front of someone who's going to give you some information that's kind of trash.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and I think even like the doctors don't have, the way our healthcare is set up, doctors don't have the bandwidth to be connected to the patients enough to like understand how their healing journey has gone. And I even think that 99% of the time, like physical therapy isn't really structured for returning to performance. And I think the places where that's an exception is places like Tahoe, places like Jackson, places like Park City, places like Vail, where you have high-end orthopedic doctors and you have physical therapy setups that know that, like, physical therapy traditionally, and for most people that are practicing it, is trying to get people back to a normal level of like day-to-day life, to be able to go to the grocery store, to be able to walk your dog, to be able to like play with your kid in your living room, not like ski 30 miles an hour down a couloir and then like hit a jump at the bottom of it, right? And so there's not that many places there's not that many places that really have even the knowledge base or the setup where that makes sense, where it's kind of this all-encompassing thing where it's like your PT is talking to your doctor and your PT is also working with a trainer, and you have this cohesive program that's like not just getting you back from tearing your ACL to like doing your day job, but really getting you back to enjoying high level, high impact activities at the same ability or beyond that of where you were before.
I mean, maybe we should get together and come up with a new healthcare plan that, like, wouldn't that be kind of nice if there was, because right now, okay, if LeBron James blows his knee, dude's got a city like taking, you know, that guy is going to be fine. But the average person is not, even with good healthcare, you can have a good healthcare plan and it can still be jumping through hoops to get the care that you need. That's really frustrating from just a baseline standpoint, like you're saying, when you're trying to get back to walking your kid to school, or when you're trying to get back to getting off the couch pain-free. Those are, like you said, I think the main goal of a lot of physical therapy programs and the education behind them is to get people back to baseline activity, back to non-sedentary lifestyles. But what if you're already not sedentary? What if you're super active? And it shouldn't be frustrating to get in front of a care provider and try to navigate that. Someone should come up with a sports healthcare program or option that you can get where you're immediately provided with like higher end level care where they understand the athletic demands of the sports that you do and all that. But I mean, beggars can't be choosers.
Yeah. Well, I think we kind of have that in South Lake now. And I think that after not having that for so long, because it's pretty recent, it's pretty stark how much of a difference it's made to like even just normal mountain people. Like the number of people that have ended up injured there in the last 4 years since I blew my knee and it was opened was just to like everyone from like professional guides to just people in town that ski all the time to other Olympic level athletes that are coming down and you actually have that kind of full spectrum of care where the gym is in the same facility as the physical therapist, right. And the physical therapist and the trainers are talking and making active modifications on like, oh, well, this isn't moving that well today. Like maybe we should modify this and like really getting you back to better than where you were before. And I'm, like one of the guys in town, Todd Offenbacher, he's a guide, does a bunch of guiding in Norway and Antarctica and does the Adventure Film Festival up here. He's a Mammut athlete. Yeah. And he's probably, I think he's in his 50s now. And I mean, he raves about how he feels better and stronger than he's felt in 10, 15 years. And a lot of it's because of that. And he started the program because he got either a knee or a hip replacement. So now with a knee or full hip, I don't remember which one it is, he's moving and feeling more stable and stronger for long ski tour days, big mountain bikes, like rock climbing 14 pitch peaks than he was 10 years ago in his 40s, because like nobody had that nobody had that pathway for kind of healthcare and performance.
It sounds like a lot of what you're saying is like communication channels between the various stages of whatever you're there. Like you have the injury stage, the intake stage, rehab, whatever your like PT prescription is, and then training should kind of be like paired up with a coach, or a trainer should be basically the outpatient procedure of it. But It sounds like they have a really good communication channel there where people are talking to each other about things. And I think that's such a crucial element, as when you are the patient or when you are the athlete, is you're not the expert in that situation. When you're an injured athlete, you're not the expert. You're an expert when you're in the pipe, when you're on the racetrack, when you're in the gym. When you're injured, you're the outsider. And the other people in that process need to be communicating at a high level. One, so that you have the peace of mind as the athlete or the individual, but also so that the process itself moves along at the right speed, because delays in communication or redundancies, if you go to PT and they're telling you one thing and then your trainer's telling you another, and now you're losing distrust in the whole or you're distrusting the whole process. So yeah, if anyone can find out to take this model in Lake Tahoe and drop it all over the country where there's surfers and skiers and mountain bikers and everything, I hope that we will get to a day where that's more available to a lot of people, because it's scary being injured, man. It just, even if you're mentally tough, it just rocks your world, because you don't think about being injured when you're not. You don't go on every mountain bike ride going, I really got to appreciate this ride, because if I hit a tree on this ride, man, that would really be a bummer. You can't. It would be unhealthy to carry that mindset into everything you do. So you just don't think about it. And so it's not familiar when it happens. And then when it does, you could be the most optimistic, clear-headed person, and it can be really depressing and a bummer.
Yeah.
And then you're dealing with the mental side of it,
Yeah. And I mean, the mental is huge. I mean, the number of people that come back and are stronger than they were before, the people there, say like a US ski team level athlete that has those kind of resources and is coming back stronger than they were before, like in a good place, but just can't jump those mental hurdles to accept those risks, right? Where, you're talking about anytime you get on a mountain bike, or on skis, like there's risk involved. You could easily catch an edge,
totally,
skiing powder, or like hook in like a weird snow fell out of a tree and your tip hooks weird and then you plow into a tree. Like that's a risk every day you go skiing, but you don't think about it.
Yep.
But then when you have the injury, some people can't stop thinking about it.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, I know people that have been injured across multiple different sports, right? And they don't return to the sport. And if you know the person before that happens, you know deep down what impact that's having on them, inability to do what they want to do, especially when it's something so annoying like that. Like those things happen all the time, especially on mountains, because it is an inherently unpredictable environment. It is a mountain. You're trying to perform a leisurely activity on a mountain. Like it is not there to be, we groom it and we try to prepare and all this stuff. But the second that you change any of those elements, you're completely out of your element. And the littlest things can happen. You can uncover a rock that you didn't think was there. You can catch your tip on a twig when you're coming out of a tree line. I mean, the laundry list of things that can happen on a ski hill is endless. And I think that we just all need to respect a little bit more the environment we're going into, that those things can happen. And I think that's where training and preparation, all that kind of stuff becomes so valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for most people, it ends up being hard because, if you're someone who only gets to ski one trip a year or 20 days a year or whatever, like it might be hard to notice the difference of like when you go into the season in pretty good shape versus not, or that difference of you're in shape versus you're not in shape isn't that big of a spectrum. But I think one of the benefits that I had is skiing half pipe at a high level. Like you're going so fast through these compressions. When we go to Colorado and it's Thanksgiving and the first half pipe opens, day 2 how fit you are, because instantly, because there's so many G forces every single time you're going through the half pipe at that sort of speed. You're like, oh, well, I feel like super strong. Like I can resist this, like my back feels fine. And if you're not strong that year, you're like, whoa, this is really smashing me.
Yeah, I guess as an athlete, you get that instant feedback. Plus you have comparison of your previous self and then that relative to your competitors. So you can see like, if you're Kyle going down and after the 10th run, you're like, man, I'm gassed. And then your homie goes and does 5 more. It's kind of like, whoa, wait, we're the same level competitor. What are you doing? How can you do that? And so you instantly have that feedback. Whereas, the average person who's going out for like a ski trip or something, you have to put the responsibility on yourself beforehand. You can't wait for the feedback to tell you if you're in shape or not. Because if you're not, your body's not going to respond well to resistance and changes in the environment. So it's like, I remember growing up skiing in Steamboat, like we were so spoiled because we had a man-made mogul course. We had the snow that falls in Colorado is insane. We'd go out to like Killington or something like that. And I'm like, man, like you got to earn your stripes out there, because you show up to the course and you basically just don't train in the morning. Because if you're going to get up there like 7 a.m., you're skiing rock solid snow, and they don't chop the landings until like contest is about to start basically. So you just pray that your run is in like the afternoon so that the snow can soften up a little bit. But when those dudes would come out to Colorado, oh my God, they just shred, because they're used to skiing this rock hard, like death course. And then they show up and it's like nice snow and it's perfectly slipped. And it's like a completely different environment. I mean, I'm sure competing half pipes, there was some similarities there, but now you're like much more into free skiing, right? You're a lot more time in the backcountry. I watched some of the videos on your YouTube of you skiing. I don't know what they're called. You just said it starts with a C, like a couloirs.
Yeah.
And you came up to this part, and I was watching the video and I was like, nope, like that's not, you don't ski that thing. So you guys are definitely going to take your skis off and walk down. And you're chatting with your buddy and you do like some Scott Gaffney, like big hop turns down. And then you guys figured out a way through. I was like, that's the wildest thing I've ever seen. Why do you want to go ski that stuff?
Man, so almost like on the discipline side of things, like where I feel like I could have had a lot more success is I've just always had an insane love for skiing. And I just like, but it's never been discipline based. Like I think I've touched all these disciplines, like growing up racing, and then I was kind of over that. And then ski cross, and I liked that, and slopestyle and half pipe. But what's so cool about skiing is there's, even within just the sport of skiing, there's so many niches.
Mm-hmm.
And like what I've always wanted since I was a little kid is to be like the best all around skier in the world. And there's no really, I think when I was younger, I sort of thought of that in like the sense of like being Candide back in the day, where it's
Right.
like, you know, you can, or Tanner, where you're like, oh, I want to go to X Games and I want to medal in like slopestyle, half pipe, and ski cross. Like I want to do
Right.
something that nobody's done in that sense. But now, like I just love skiing, and I think that there's all these elements that backcountry is something I never was exposed to as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I never went touring. We never went backpacking in the summertime. And it's just this opportunity within skiing to like really dive in and learn all these new skills and become just like a more capable mountain traveler. And so
Mm-hmm.
like that's what I'm into now. And what's kind of nice is, you know, you can do it for the adventure, or when conditions are good, like you can let it rip. And then I don't know, I just think it's cool. And it's just like a new venue to challenge myself and learn something new in.
Yeah, I mean, it looks fascinating. I've never done much ski. I've done backcountry, like, you know, snowmobile access type stuff, but never really gotten into ski touring. And it looks, from the videos that you have on your YouTube channel and then just other videos that I've seen of people doing it, it's one of those, it reminds me of like surfing is the only spot where I don't get to bring a cell phone in my life. Like it's this
Mm-hmm.
special moment where it's just so different than everything else. And with the backcountry ski touring, like you are accessing stuff that is not period available to anyone who's not willing to do that to get there. Like
Yeah.
you will not access these points unless you skin. So if you took all the skiers in the country and you funneled them down to like how many people are proficient in skinning, those that have like the ski skills necessary, because that's a big back end part of it, but then also like the front end avalanche safety, be mindful, be aware, like, and preparation side, it's got to be a small group of people that are really capable of going and skiing something like that. So you are in a very small group of like global skiers doing something, and that's got to feel really cool because it's like a new frontier, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it is really cool. And I like that you likened it to surfing. And I think that it's really similar to mountain biking, you know, like backcountry ski touring is just like trail riding, where it's like you have to have the fitness and you have to pedal up to enjoy the downhill.
Right.
And it's just this opportunity, like you said, like the number of people that can do it is so small, but then you also have so much terrain, you know, you're not confined to the boundaries, or like outside the ski resort boundary where you can still make it to the lift if you cut back early, you know, like
Yeah.
there's no confine. Like the fitter you are, the more runs you can ski, the harder you can ski when you're out there, and like the further you can go. And it's been huge. I mean, tying it back into fitness stuff is like, I never want to be, it's like you said, where you always want to be able to say yes. Like
Yeah.
I never want to be the weakest person in my group. And I think that all this stuff is so niche that, you know, like I might not be the fastest on the skin track or be able to go the furthest, but like when you combine like ski capabilities and fitness for overall, like I always want to be someone who is bringing the group up and
Yeah.
is above that median level. And so I'm there as more of a supporting role, because if it doesn't hurt as much, then it's way more fun for me.
Right.
But
From a fitness,
you
yeah,
you
totally.
never feel like you're like the person in the group that's the liability. And
Yeah.
when that's the case, you get invited more. You get to go on cooler trips. You get to go on to like cooler ski lines. Like people don't, if they know that you're prepared and then know that you're fit and like that, you know, your backcountry safety stuff, people invite you and all you have to do is say yes.
I think it's really interesting how fitness start like for, I mean, we're venturing more in towards like extreme and adventure type stuff here, but fitness starts out as like a prerequisite. Like if you want to get into skinning, for example, from mountain skiing, you need to have a generally higher level of fitness in order to do it. You can ski groomers all day long, but if you're going to skin up and skin down, you do need to be more fit than you were on the mountain. But then when you start to slide this over towards like the more adventure side of the spectrum, where now you're being like, yo, Kyle, we're going, you're invited to come with us. It goes from being a prerequisite to being a mandate. Like, because now there's a risk factor associated with a lack of fitness. And if you're in some of these situations and you are the weakest link, you're not the weakest link for you. You're now the weakest link for the group. And that potentially puts everybody at risk. And so it becomes like, it's nice to like hike up and not be like, oh, the lactic acid in my legs. But that's a lot different than like, hey, fog's rolling in. We have to make this next peak in 10 minutes or we're building a snow camp. And you don't want to be the guy that's like, okay, I'm going to put all my effort into this, but hope I see you guys there. Like that's not a fucking option at that level. And so it becomes from a prerequisite to a mandate, like you have to have it or you can't come, period.
Yeah. And it just becomes such a liability. And like the same thing happens at a resort, right? You only get hurt, not only, but let's say 90% of the time you get hurt when you're tired and fatigued. It's the end of the day. It's gotten slushy or the powder's gotten heavier or it's like it's gotten crusty because the snow was 2 days ago. And you're like, it's always when you're tired and you're sloppy and those kind of things when you lose form or you make a mistake, and that's when injuries happen. But the severity of that and the liability of that when you're in the backcountry is just so much more heightened, because it's like if this normal lap that you go out and do with your buddies, it's like, we'll say it's 2 peaks, right? And you're gaining 2,500 feet of elevation. Like there's a difference between being able to do it where you could do that every day, 5 days a week, and being the guy that like made it to the second peak, but is like pretty exhausted. And now you're that sloppy person, because when you're traveling in the backcountry, it's like you said, like you're responsible for everyone in your group. And if something happens, ski patrol doesn't show up. Like, you're responsible for
no lifeguard on duty.
the safety and the escape plan if anything is to happen. And so really, it becomes a mandate, and not having the fitness or not having the backcountry knowledge, or there's so many elements of it, like all of those things become huge liabilities to your group.
I was heli skiing in Revelstoke one time, and it was with Eagle Pass, which is like small group heli skiing. So I think we have like 4 people to a helicopter. So you're pretty mobile relative to like the big group heli stuff. So if you're like, hey, we want to ski that, if the skill level exists within the group, they're like, cool. The guides are incredible. They're really knowledgeable, solid dudes. And we're coming down, and they give really clear instructions. You go through your avalanche safety stuff. And even if like, for me, it was my first time doing that, you're trying to retain as much as you want. But at the same time, you're trusting that like at the end of the day, the guide's the guide. That's really the voice of reason here. It would take multiple avalanche courses for me to become proficient to a level where I would actually trust myself. But we came down and we had the coolest guide. Like he was so chill, younger dude. And he comes down, he goes, who the fuck skied offline? And we're all like, whoa, like it was so out of character for him because he was such like a chill dude. And immediately I looked at my buddy. I was like, dude, did you ski out? Like, did you cross the line? I didn't cross the line. And we're like looking around, and he goes, everyone over here. And we all kind of like skirt over to, it was like the edge of the run kind of bowled out. And he's like, points up and he's like, those are my lines. And you could very clearly see that, because the rule was never ski right of the guide's lines, right? Because we don't know where we are up there or whatever. And so he's like, see those are my lines. See them clear as day right on the edge of the trail. And then you see another set that basically like swooped down and went wide and then came back in. And he's like, who was it? And I mean, definitely wasn't me and my friend. I know that. And the other 2 dudes, I think they were just like a little shook by this guy's approach. And he's like, this is why you don't do that. And he took his pole and he whacked where the bowl started, and the entire bowl, like instantaneously, just and went down into the valley. And I was like, I mean, legitimately, I watched that happen, and in the moment, it freaked me out. Like, I've been skiing for 15 years. I was a competitor. I trust my skills 100% in the backcountry. And I was with someone who I entrusted them for like the guide aspect of it. And we're all being respectful. And you forget when you're having fun and you're out there that this is real deal. Mother Nature gives no shits when it comes to this kind of stuff. And it was something simple, like the guy probably didn't even mean to, right? He was skiing down. He was like, oh, I'm having a blast. I'm going to cut right. I'm going to cut left. And just seeing that, like, you realize in those moments how much value each person has to the safety of the other people. Yeah. Because it might have been a situation where he cuts out, it loosens it. The next guy comes down, follows him, hits it, and it's an avalanche. Like, your margin for error just, it actually doesn't exist up there. There's no margin for error. So if you come with less fitness, you come with less knowledge, you come with less respect for the group, I mean, it's potentially life and death for the other people there.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's crazy.
And it's also, I mean, it ties into just like the consequences of the sports we do. And I think, we always turn a blind eye. And I think a lot of times you don't know, right? Like you weren't proficient in the backcountry, right, and you're like, oh, well, we just skied here. Like everything's probably fine. And he does something as small as hits the cornice with his pole and the whole bowl rips out. And so it's, without that knowledge, like, you're always putting yourself in these circumstances where there's a lot of risk and the consequences are super severe, whether or not you recognize them. And I think some people have a hard time, once they do recognize them, kind of overcoming that. Like, I know tons of people that take avalanche courses and then are so, I don't know if it's because of how their instructor taught it or just how they digest information as a person. Like, they become so scared of it that they never even ski anything over 30 degrees because technically it's like you're in avalanche terrain, or you, like, once you know that, you could fall on a dub 12 in the half pipe and break your tailbone, like, then you never do a dub 12 in the half pipe again, or whatever it is. And, people have asked me since I got hurt, it's like, well, one of my buddies that was with me, and we were supposed to go to a mountain bike race next weekend. And he's like, well, what do you think? I've been thinking about this a lot. And it's, there's like, were there mistakes that I made when I hit that tree, or are the consequences too high? And I think there's so many risks involved with the sports that we do, and you don't always directly comprehend what those risks are or the severity of those risks, but it could happen to anyone. And it's kind of like, the whole time you're going along with the hope that it just doesn't happen to you. You're hoping you're not like a Paul Bass that gets paralyzed, and you're hoping you're not, but it's weird because I feel like when you think about it, it feels like you have no control over your destiny. But I mean, I don't necessarily agree with that.
It would be a tall ask to carry the weight of worrying about that stuff every time that you step into the sport that you want to do. If every time you paddled out, you were thinking about drowning, or if every time that you got on your mountain bike,
or getting eaten by sharks, dude. Surfing in California, there's sharks everywhere. Like, you sit at Huntington Beach, just because you don't know they're there, there's freaking sharks there.
They live there.
It doesn't mean you're going to get attacked.
Right. And you can't think it like, this is a cheesy connection, but I think that's why training for me is such a staple in my life, is because it gives just enough peace of mind for me to not worry about the stuff. Because look, if I go to a tournament and I pop my knee out, I pop my knee out. No crying over spilt milk. Rehab it as quick as possible, get back out there. But I'm confident, and was and will be, going into the tournament because of all the efforts that I put in the gym. And I think about skiing the same way I think about road biking, mountain biking. When I go mountain bike, I know the inherent risk. Like, I've slammed before. I've slammed downhill. I've slammed cross country. It absolutely sucks. Like, my least favorite slam is mountain bike slam. But I kind of just trust that, like, my training and my preparation and everything, constantly being ready for whatever is available is enough. And then you deal with it when it happens. And so it's kind of like, I don't know, if you're in a relationship where you don't trust someone and you think about how you don't trust them every single day, eventually they're going to lie to you and you're going to have to, but you've dealt with it all the times you don't trust them, plus the time that they actually lied.
Yeah.
Better just be oblivious. And then if it does happen, you just deal with it one time and you move on. So it's like, I think for the average person going and skiing or whatever sports you guys are doing, snowboarding or surfing, whatever, the physical preparation should give you a little bit of the peace of mind to not concern yourself quite so much with how crazy shit can actually get when you're out in the elements.
I agree. I totally agree. I think I want to challenge you on this though, because I think people in the mountains, like people that have always built their fitness on doing the activities that are like super proficient at these things. I think it's like the stick versus the carrot approach. And the reality of like the positive reinforcement versus negative reinforcement. Like you're approaching this and saying, I like to think of this as a safety, and it's like preventing me from negative things.
Right. Training. You're talking about like
the training.
Yeah.
And going to the gym. Yeah. And I think the other way to look at it is like, the easier way to do it is like find friends and find community in the gym, but it makes your sports so much more fun. Like when you go and you step on snow first time of the season, and depending on where you are, like for me, Mammoth is always the first place to open. It's like October or November. And I always spend the first couple of weeks just skiing groomers on my old GS skis because it's fun as shit when you haven't skied in months. When you're in shape and you can go out and just crush 10, 15 laps of skiing, like hard, high G-force turns, it is so much more fun. Or you like drop into a line confidently, or you're like ready to hit some jumps. Like you go to the park and you hit a bunch of jumps, and at the end of the day, your back isn't sore from all the impacts. Like, like the fitness that you do and building that strength in the off season, it just makes the sports that you do so much more fun. Like going to the gym isn't going to get you necessarily in like running shape or biking shape, in the sense that like the first 3 times you go biking of the season, or the first couple times you go running, like they all suck.
Right. Totally.
It doesn't matter because it's different.
Yeah.
But like having that whole well-rounded fitness, it's going to suck less. And when you get on the downhill, like your body's going to move better. And so like you're going to progress faster. So you're going to get better at your sports, and you're going to enjoy it more, and you're going to be less throttled at the end of it, and you're going to recover faster. Like everything about what you're doing to prepare for the sport makes the sport itself more fun. And I think I've always like looked at it as like this time that I'm doing thing that I don't necessarily want to do versus the things that I do want to do, like go outside and do those activities. But by sacrificing a little bit of this time doing this and spending it in the gym, then all of the things that I like to do are easier, safer, and way more fun. And you just like your ability to progress and do those things at a high level and be a contributor to your group instead of a detractor, and like all those things are this gym sets you up for that. But I think so many people are looking at this like, oh, well, if I put my time, it's, I'll be a little bit stronger and maybe I won't get hurt. But like you can be fit and you can still get fucked up. But you hit a tree, right? But like the consequences might be less. And you're like, instead of looking at it as like this insurance against something negative, it just makes the things that you do so much more fun. Even if you're a 1 week a year skier, like you're a 1 week a year skier, you go with 6 of your buddies from college.
Yeah.
If you're the one dude after the day that you like, you can go ski all day and you still feel pretty good. And it's like, maybe you're a little sore, but you feel pretty good. But 2 of your other friends are just like so sore they can't get out of bed the next morning. You have way more fun on that trip because you're not the lowest man on the totem pole. Every part of the trip, you'll have more energy. You'll be able to go out at night and go grab drinks and whatever with your buddies. Like, you'll be able to ski more runs, more days. Everything about it becomes more fun.
Well, first off, thanks for challenging me. Number one, the big part of like these podcasts is I like different viewpoints. I like when people present things that I don't think of maybe. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I would say it's probably not that I wasn't thinking of it that way, but you're right. I'm framing it 100% from a negative reinforcement standpoint, saying do this so that you don't get hurt. But in saying that, I am missing one of the most important things, which is the enjoyment factor. I mean, you're 100% right. Your ability to perform in your sport does exactly what you said, which is increase your ability to improve fast. Mm-hmm. And if you are like a weekend warrior kind of person, you do want those days to be exponentially better every time you go. You don't want it to be stagnant. Like, you'd like to improve. And you're 100% right. I mean, the same is true for anything else. Surfing, for example, if your fitness is improved, if you have better cardiovascular baseline, you can paddle harder. You paddle harder, you get more waves. You get more waves, you have more fun. Like, it's I'm really glad that you said that, because it is a very important point about training. And I think it actually, for someone who isn't as in love with training as like myself or yourself, it does it puts a different light on it, that like there can be other reasons for doing it. You can want to have more fun doing the things you like to do too, not just constantly be trying to get not hurt. Because look, I just almost blew my knee and you hit a tree, and we train all the time. So like, I mean, you're 100% right there. Dude, Kyle, I think on that note, it's also a positive note to finish on, that people should, get in the gym, find that consistency, put forth the efforts in training, really, so that you can just maximize your enjoyment through the season. So you can get out there, you keep up with your buddies, you can meet new friends and keep pushing your limits and just have fun, not get injured. I'd love to hear, like, where can people find you, projects you're working on? Is there anything that you want to just like shamelessly plug, things that are important to you? Go for it.
You can find me on social media. I have a Facebook. I never go on it. Don't message me on there. Instagram is just at Kyle Smaine. My last name is like the state of Maine with an S in front, Smaine. So it's pretty easy. Same on TikTok at Kyle Smaine. And then we need to rename our channel, but I have a YouTube channel. It's pretty small, but we're going to be putting up a bunch of new videos this winter. Awesome. It's with my buddy, one of my best friends, Brian Walker, and myself. And I think right now it's just YouTube or / Kyle and Brian, but we need to like come up with a proper name. And I have a whole, last spring I filmed a bunch of trick tips. So I'll have trick tip videos coming out this fall.
Oh, sick.
And we'll have more videos like the stuff that we have up there of kind of like adventure stories from the winter. And so we'll have a lot of both informational, instructional stuff and just fun adventure stuff to get you guys fired up. And otherwise, I mean, I guess just thank you for having me on, and massive thank you to like family, friends, community, PT Revolution, like all the sponsors over the years, guys like Matt Berkowitz at Fisher, who's at Ski Monster now. But like I was provided a lot of opportunities and over the years to get to where I am, and I'm pretty thankful to like be able to have traveled the world for skiing and still be able to get paid a little bit of money to go skiing and work on projects like product development and new skis and things like that with Fisher and whatever, because it's pretty cool to just like meet a bunch of other really rad people and ski new places.
For sure. Well, you're a humble man, an awesome guest, and I'm stoked that you are forever the first Ski System podcast guest, and I'm sure that you'll be back on in no time. So thank you so much, Kyle.
Yeah, absolutely.